Quebec's separatist movement, it's always been there, quiet, patient, simmering. Now, in 2025, it's starting to stir again, not with protests, not with violence, but with questions, deep, uncomfortable ones.
The Quebec bombshell that stopped Ottawa cold. So, something just happened in Canadian politics that has Ottawa spinning like a rookie figure skater on thin ice. And this time, it didn't come from the West. Nope. This earthquake came straight from Quebec, and it's got Parliament Hill frozen mid-step. Quebec didn't just throw out a vague statement about cultural pride. They didn't do the usual, we need more autonomy song and dance. No, this was a full-throttle, straight-to-the-point, drop-the-mic announcement. Another sovereignty referendum is coming. Not in the far-off political someday, not when the conditions are right in some hypothetical future. They are openly saying, we are closer than you think. And that sound you just heard, that was Ottawa's jaw hitting the floor.
And I think that there's a solution here to those kind of sentiments, whether they're in the West or whether they're in Quebec. And the solution is to honor and respect the Constitution and honor and respect provincial jurisdiction and allow for autonomy, allow for Quebec to develop policies that make sense for Quebec and allow Alberta to develop policies that make sense for Alberta. So that the pathway is there to bring the temperature down.
The press conference nobody saw coming. It went down in Montreal, in one of those mid-morning pressers everyone thought would be about Bill 96 tweaks or maybe a jab at Ottawa over immigration. The Parti Québécois leader, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, steps up to the podium. He's calm, he's collected, he's got that I'm about to change the conversation look on his face. Then he drops it, first in French, then in English, so nobody could pretend they misheard. Quebec will hold another referendum on sovereignty when the time is right. And that time may be much sooner than people think.
On sait que le Québec a une longue historique de revendication de son indépendance, portée par mon parti, mais qui a été un peu, dans les dernières années, mis en concurrence avec l'autonomisme. C'est la doctrine de François Legault, c'est la doctrine d'Éric Duhem.
Boom. No hedging, no political fluff. Just a declaration so blunt that the reporters in the room went from tapping notes to full-on panic tweeting. Within minutes, the clip is bouncing across every news network, trending on social media, and replaying on radio stations from Halifax to Whitehorse. In Ottawa, phones start buzzing in ministers' offices. Staffers are whispering in hallways. And up in the Prime Minister's office, radio silence. Not because they don't care, but because they know exactly what this means. You know, the numbers that make Ottawa sweat. See, when Alberta talks separation, Ottawa gets nervous, but they know they can try to scare people with economic apocalypse speeches. But Quebec, that's a whole different game. We're talking about 23% of Canada's population, 20% of the country's GDP. Complete control over the St. Lawrence Seaway, the artery that connects Canada's heartland to global trade routes. Losing Quebec isn't losing a province. It's like losing a lung and half your spine at the same time. Why this isn't just 1995 all over again. Sure, Quebec separatism has been around forever. There was the 1980 referendum, 60% no. Then the near-death experience in 1995 where no barely squeaked by at 50.58%. That close call sent Ottawa into overdrive with unity campaigns, cultural investments, and endless handshakes in Montreal. For a while, it worked. Sovereignty numbers dropped. Federalists relaxed. People assumed the whole thing was dead and buried. But now, the mood has shifted. Two major changes. One, the Parti Québécois is back in fighting shape. After years of decline, they're surging in polls and dominating the sovereignty conversation.
I don't know how we could get young people get more interested in politics and in the idea of Quebec being independent. We're trying as young members of a party to find a solution to this, but it's really, really hard.
Two, the West has shown the blueprint. Wexit went from a fringe meme to an organized movement with legal pathways and funding. Quebec separatists have been watching and learning. This isn't nostalgia, it's strategy. The triggers they're waiting for. PQ insiders aren't shy about their game plan. They're waiting for Ottawa to hand them a golden opportunity. That could be a fight over immigration quotas, with Ottawa trying to push more newcomers than Quebec wants. A Supreme Court ruling that undercuts Bill 96 or other language protections. Federal climate policies that threaten Quebec industries or Hydro-Quebec's business model. Hit any of those and the PQ hits the gas. Media goes into unity emergency mode. CBC was the first to scramble a panel of unity experts within hours. The Toronto Star ran headlines about old divisions returning. The Globe and Mail warned of economic chaos if Quebec left. But here's the problem for Ottawa. Those warnings are reruns from 1995, and people are tuning them out. Back then, you could buy primetime ad space, scare voters with doom scenarios, and expect it to work. In 2025, a single live stream from a sovereignty rally can outpull the PM's entire press conference in views.
But I think you're seeing that it's not just Alberta. Saskatchewan's upset. Quebec is upset. I think that you'll hear from other provinces. They're also frustrated at the level of interference in provincial jurisdictions.
Ottawa's old playbook is useless. The federal government's response to separatism hasn't evolved in decades. It's still the scare, then spend strategy. Tell people leaving will ruin them, then offer last-minute goodies to make them stay. But Quebec voters don't need Ottawa's national airtime anymore. They have TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and hundreds of independent media channels ready to amplify their message without Ottawa's filter. And every time Ottawa says you can't do that, it feeds the separatist argument that Ottawa doesn't respect Quebec's right to decide its own future. The earthquake potential. If Quebec pulls the trigger on a referendum, the fallout will make Alberta's Wexit chatter look like a town hall dispute. We're talking Atlantic Canada cut off from Ontario by an international border. The West seeing a green light to launch their own exits. Ontario becoming even more politically dominant, fueling resentment everywhere else. The balance of Canadian politics would be shattered. Bottom line, this isn't a trial balloon, it's a flare in the night sky. Quebec's saying, we're ready, just give us a reason. And if history has taught us anything, it's that Ottawa will eventually give them one. Inside Quebec's sovereignty machine. If you think Quebec's sovereignty talk is just political posturing, a few sound bites to fire up the base, you're missing the real story. This isn't an idea, it's an operation. A fully built, quietly humming political machine that's been refining its gears for years while Ottawa thought the engine was dead. And now, it's warmed up, fueled, and pointed straight at Canada's national unity. The polling Ottawa doesn't show you. Here's the thing. The polls you see on TV are the polite ones. They keep support for independence in the mid-30s so Ottawa doesn't break into a cold sweat before breakfast.
We don't shut the gate. This is not true. We are lowering our goals, our scenario.
But inside PQ headquarters, different numbers are taped to the wall. Francophones under 40, 52% support independence before a campaign even starts. Rural Quebec and small towns consistently 55 to 58% yes side leaning. When you tell people Ottawa can't legally block the referendum, support jumps 7 to 10 points overnight. And here's the scary comparison for Ottawa. In 1995, the yes side started in the low 30s and gained 10 points during the campaign. Do that math with today's numbers and you see why the PMO isn't sleeping well. The new ground game, forget 1995.
In 1995, Quebec came within a fraction of leaving Canada. The referendum on sovereignty fell by less than 1%, just over 50.5% to 49.4%. That moment shook the country.
The old sovereignty push was rallies, flyers, and knocking on doors until your knuckles bled. It worked then, but now Quebec's separatists have gone digital sniper mode.
If Quebec decides to be on their own, they can do it. I can definitely think they can do it, though.
Micro-targeted Facebook and Instagram ads by region, age, and language preference. TikTok clips under a single unified hashtag blending pride, economics, and history in 30 seconds. YouTube mini docs explaining pourquoi maintenant, why now, with glossy editing and emotional storytelling. They're bypassing the traditional media Ottawa used to control. They don't need the CBC's airtime. They own their own channels.
Young people are looking to connect with Quebec content on TikTok, on Instagram, so we see that the two feed off each other. And when young people and artists get involved, we can say that the movement is well on its way for the coming years.
Money in the war chest. A movement like this doesn't run on vibes alone. The PQ has built a funding network that's both deep and discreet. Private donations from Quebec-based entrepreneurs in tech, energy, and media. Grassroots crowdfunding pulling 6 figures in days. Nonprofit advocacy groups, essentially PACs in all but name, sponsoring events, paying for digital ads, and funding research. And unlike the 90s, Ottawa doesn't have the moral leverage to shame or blacklist donors. People give openly. Some even post about it on social media like it's a badge of honor. the legal chess match. Everyone knows about the Clarity Act, Ottawa's way of saying you can't just leave without our permission. The PQ's legal team has been preparing to tear that argument apart. They've been gathering opinions from constitutional experts, digging into international law, and building the case that Quebec's right to self-determination outweighs federal legislation. Challenge the Clarity Act in court before the referendum, hold the referendum anyway, get a yes result, and then dare Ottawa to be the one dragging their feet against a Democratic vote. The Alliance Network. Here's the plot twist. Quebec's not entirely alone in this fight. Western separatist groups have already exchanged strategy notes with PQ activists. Alberta's Wexit organizers know their fight benefits if Quebec goes first. Indigenous leadership inside Quebec has begun laying down conditions, recognition of their own sovereignty within a sovereign Quebec. That's complicated, but it gives the movement a broader conversation about self-determination that Ottawa struggles to counter. The emotional fuel. Movements live or die on emotional connection, and Quebec's sovereignty campaign is tapping into three core storylines.
Quebec has always been different, French-speaking, culturally distinct, and often at odds with decision-makers in English-speaking Ottawa.
1. Cultural survival, the fear that without independence, Quebec's French identity will be slowly erased. 2. Economic freedom, the idea that billions in Quebec tax dollars are bled away to fund policies they didn't vote for. 3. Respect, or more accurately, the lack of it from Ottawa. It's not just policy debates, it's pride, history, and self-respect rolled into one. Waiting for the spark, insiders have a short list of trigger events that could set off the referendum push overnight. Immigration quotas, Ottawa tries to push past Quebec's limits. A Supreme Court ruling gutting Bill 96, federal climate policy cutting into Hydro-Quebec's export profits. When one of these hits, the campaign goes from warm-up laps to a full sprint. Why Ottawa's playbook will fail. Ottawa's last winning hand in 1995 was fear.
They're paying somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 every time they bring someone in. They are doing this because there's no one on the local market that are willing to take the job opportunity.
Fear of job loss, fear of instability, fear of losing your mortgage rate. But this generation has already lived through political instability, housing crises, and global chaos. They're harder to scare. Plus, the sovereignty side is ready to answer those fear points instantly, with videos, graphics, and counter-narratives going viral before Ottawa's even written its press release. And this is the part that should keep the PMO awake at night. The sovereignty machine is running at low speed right now. They're not even trying to mobilize everyone yet, and they're already polling high enough to make a real run. The day Quebec walks out, the campaign is run, the ballots are counted, the dust settles, and for the first time in Canadian history, the yes side wins. Even if it's by a single percentage point, Quebec's premier steps up to the microphone and says, Quebec will begin negotiations to become a sovereign nation. Well, it's not just political history, it's a continental earthquake. The shockwave hits immediately, the Canadian dollar tanks. Stock markets in Toronto and Montreal open deep in the red. Bond rating agencies issue downgrades before lunch. Investors pause major projects. And the St. Lawrence Seaway, no longer a domestic route, Quebec sets the terms now. Tariffs, inspections, the works. Ottawa loses control of its own trade artery overnight. Negotiating the divorce. Quebec's share will be big, but they'll argue for offsets tied to federal assets in the province. Military assets, who gets what and who pays to move it. Currency, keep the Canadian dollar, make a new franc, or join another system. Borders and trade, customs between Ontario and Quebec, rules for Atlantic supply chains. Economic fallout for Canada. 20% of GDP gone. A quarter of the population foreign overnight. Equalization collapses without Quebec's contributions. Federal budgets spiral into cuts or tax hikes. Provinces like Alberta refuse to pick up the slack. Political domino effect. If Quebec leaves, Alberta and Saskatchewan will see proof it's possible. Northern British Columbia might consider jumping ship. Atlantic Canada could rethink ties entirely. On international shifts, the U.S. moves fast to secure trade and security agreements. France recognizes Quebec within days. The EU follows. NATO's Arctic strategy changes overnight. Cultural shock.
I think it's interesting in a cultural way, but I still believe that there are some economic restriction that would not allow us to be independent.
Federal bilingualism dies. The maple leaf loses a language. Canada's identity is rewritten in real time. The countdown is real. The machine is ready. The triggers are many. Ottawa's betting history won't repeat. Quebec's betting it will. And if they win that bet, Canada stops.